Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I can't imagine you had a whole lot of homework. Based on what McGarity was telling me after your Discord, you're mostly sleeping and laying around. So, hopefully, this week you'll set yourself maybe some list of things to do so you don't fall into despair. Um, Speaking of despair, let's talk about war. This week, what you can expect is we're going to start a book. So, we're going to start Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet today. And every day this week, you'll not have a ton of readings, just some readings from it. Um, Last week, we talked about Pearl Harbor. And we talked about the things going on in Europe, Blitzkrieg, and all these things that slowly but surely pulled the United States into the war. Of course, the number one thing that pulled us into the war is Japan bombing Pearl Harbor. Why did Japan bomb Pearl Harbor? That's right. We gave them an ultimatum. We were not happy that they were conquering China. We told them to leave China. We froze all their assets in the United States, and they got mad. And they are going to end up attacking not just Hawaii, which is where Pearl Harbor is, but they are going to attack the Malay Peninsula. They're going to attack Midway. They're going to attack the Philippines. So the American holdings in the Pacific. But the number one place that they hit most successfully is Pearl Harbor. There's over 2,400 casualties there. 1,177 of them are on one ship, the USS Arizona, which is the bodies are still entombed aboard that ship, and they are there's a memorial built above it. There are over 20 sets of brothers actually that perished together on that ship. So as you can imagine, after the United States is attacked by by Japan, Americans are raring for a fight. Congress votes on a declaration of war, and there's only one person that votes no, and that person is Jeannette Rankin, who is a pacifist. She's opposed to war in all its forms, and so that is just about the most united declaration of war that our country has ever and probably will ever see. The Japanese in bombing Pearl Harbor is said to have woken a sleeping giant. People did not understand how quickly and fully the United States could mobilize for war and what a difference we could make in the war effort. The Japanese saw the United States as a very divided nation politically and culturally and socially, and did not think that we could unite to fight a common enemy. They learned very quickly that that is incorrect. And if you look throughout our history, I mean, look at what's going on today. We are politically very divided in our country, but we can work together when a crisis comes upon us. And I think you're going to see that more and more in the coming days, actually. So on December 8th of 1941, Franklin Roosevelt will sign the Declaration of War. In this declaration, he gives a speech and he says, "Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy," right? You've all heard that phrase. That is him saying that this is going to be a pivotal time in American history. And it is, because when Pearl Harbor is bombed, we are pulled onto the world scene. And unlike after previous wars, we never come back into isolation. We are now out there, and we will be the policemen of the world for the rest of time. You guys did a nice job answering that question, by the way, on the web quests. So once the United States enters the war, one of the first things we always need to do is we need to get some men into the armed forces. You know from last week that Franklin Roosevelt had started the first peacetime draft. And it is in place when the war starts, but many, many men are going to volunteer for this war. It reminds me of when I was little, my dad would tell me that I'm never to start a fight, but if anybody hits me, not only should I hit him back, but I better hit him back. Marines believe that you always hit back. So that is what happens here, right? Our country is punched pretty hard, and men jump in to defend it, not very surprisingly. So men are going to fill the ranks of our armed forces, but then so are women. Women are going to serve a couple of different purposes. One of them, as usual, they're going to be the nurses that care for the men on the front lines. But the women are also going to be pretty close to the front lines in this war. They are going to serve in some flying corps, actually, where they will test pilot they will be test pilots for the Air Force to prepare planes and try out new technology in planes before the men are sent to the front lines in them. So they've got a very pivotal role within the armed forces. We all know about the women going into the workforce, but the armed forces as well. And we'll talk about those other women in a minute. If you had family that was serving in the war, you would oftentimes display a service flag. This is an example of a service flag here. If this was hanging in someone's window, it means that there are two people in their home that are serving in the war currently and one that has died. So the gold star would cover up a blue star when someone gave the last full measure of devotion and died in the service of their country. I see these around a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed them, but they now sell them as like decals for the back of a car. I don't know if they're decals or they're magnets, but you see these sometimes still today. When the war breaks out, of course, people go and they fight in the war, but not everybody is of fighting age, not the right gender. Sometimes they've got physical ailments that mean that they can't serve in the war. So we have a lot of home front efforts. Just like in World War I, when we looked at the propaganda posters then, we use propaganda posters, we use film now to try to influence people in any way we can to support the war. Here, we have a car sharing club. If you drive by yourself rather than carpool, you might as well be riding with Hitler. I mean, will that guilt you or what? We actually are going to ration gasoline during this war. If you are an emergency worker, like a medical worker or a fireman or something like that, you would get an X card, which meant you got unlimited gasoline for the month. If you're like a housewife or you've got just a job, they would give you the amount of gasoline you needed to function in your daily life. So this is an example of that and encouraging that. Here you have a poster trying to influence people to conserve materials like tin and nylons and things like that. And it shows that if you conserve material, you'll trap the Jap. Okay. Now I picked this one because I think it's probably, I hope, kind of offensive to you guys. If you notice, the way they're depicting this Japanese person is, well, not as a person at all. They're a rat. You see, they've got the tail and everything. The ears are so pointy, they're nearly devilish. The eyes are these tiny slants, and oftentimes in these pictures, they'll have glasses because Americans believed that the Japanese could not see as well because their eyes were slanted. Japanese misunderstood American culture. Americans misunderstood Japanese culture. Today you look at it, it's almost comical, right? Like, seriously? But we didn't have the interaction across cultures that we do today. Also, you'll notice in a lot of these pictures, they make their teeth very large and buck tooth, again, making them look kind of ignorant and weak and subhuman. If it's subhuman, then you're more likely to be able to see it as an enemy. Here's just some other posters. Some of them you've seen. We'll focus on that. One of my favorites in the middle there in a minute. Here's another example of one of the ways we encourage people to help in the home front. We encourage them to work. If you can't go and fight in the war, then find a job that's useful to the war effort. Here you got the Japanese soldier saying, go ahead, please take a day off, right? And he's got the teeth, you see the eyes, you see the glasses, it's all right there, making him look kind of not intelligent. And the idea here was Roosevelt actually worked with the unions to set very high wages within the war industries in an attempt to prevent men from going on strike and stopping any work. Because if unions went on strike, we couldn't wage the war. So they got fat wartime wages. And then we also passed an anti-strike act. So factories were actually, and the business community was actually somewhat controlled by our federal government in this time in order to produce the war that we needed to win. Here you've got a woman, gossipy women, being encouraged to keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about things because you could end up putting your husband's life in danger. And then here we've got an example of rationing. So what we did in our country is we came up with a plan that included a list of items that we thought were essential to the men overseas. Coffee, eggs, meat, at some point bread. So different food items that we felt that Americans at home could do without, or at least do less with less, and then we could send the bulk over to the men. Um, and I'm going to just jump through those. And so as a result, we gave American families what we called ration stamps. The average American family got about 48 stamps a month. And what they would do is you'd go to the grocery store, and the items that were rationed, that were limited, would be worth a certain number of stamps. So if you wanted a big fat steak, that's great, but it might be 8 ration stamps. Do you want to waste 8 ration stamps on one steak? So if you go to the stores right now, that we're not rationing, but we're limiting what people can get. They're telling people they can only buy 1 container of Clorox wipes. The other day I have been trying to buy loaves of bread for like about a week now. You can't hardly find it. So the idea was, we don't want the American people to use all that stuff up and then let the men starve overseas. And so you have people pitching in so many different ways in this war to try to make it successful for our men and defeat Hitler and the evil empire of Japan. Now, what I'd like to do is show you a video. I've mentioned already that people of all areas and all backgrounds at home, on the front lines, are fighting this war in one way or another. Well, companies that were producing peacetime materials before the war end up trying to contribute any way they can. So factories start producing weapons and stuff like that. Well, even Disney got involved. So Disney decided to turn their company into a propaganda machine. And so I would like to introduce you to Donald Duck. As you're watching this, I want you to think what methods are being used to sway your opinion of the enemy.
In time of war, it's typical, sometimes even useful, to demonize your enemy. We still see this today whenever a dictator or despot comes to power anywhere in the world. Caricatures and jokes, not always in the best of taste, rise to the forefront because it's our way of relieving aggression. So it was in World War II. Some people feared Adolf Hitler. Others mocked him. The Disney staff came up with the idea for a cartoon to be titled Donald Duck in Nazi Land, giving the all-American duck a nightmare that he was living in a country run by Nazis. The title changed when a song written for the cartoon by Oliver Wallace became a runaway hit and a now classic recording by Spike Jones. It then became essential to change the name of the cartoon to De Fuhrer's Face. It's easy to see why the film was so popular. It's very, very funny, reducing the serious tenets of Hitler's Nazism to slapstick absurdities. And it gave audiences a chance to think, as Donald does, about the freedoms they might have taken for granted.
Am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America?
By the way, Donald is my
Fuhrer's
favorite
Face,
because he's
directed
very
by
crabby.
Jack Kinney, won the Academy Award as Best Animated Short Subject of 1943.
Justice, what are you doing? You're going to be singing this all day.
And the Führer says he is the master race. The Heil, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace. So the Heil, right in the Führer's face. When Herr Goebbels says we own the world in space, the Heil, right in Herr Goebbels' face. Then Hoch Göring says they'll never bomb this place. The Heil, right in Herr Göring's face. Is he not the Superman? Arian Führer Superman? Yeah, he is the Superman. Super duper Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Yeah, this Nazi land is good. We would leave it if we could. We bring the world new order. Heil Hitler's golden order.
I mean, really?
Everyone of foreign race, they'll love the poorest face when we bring to the world disorder. Then the Buddha says, he is the master race. We hire, right in the Buddha's face, not to love the Buddha is a great disgrace. So we hire, right in the Buddha's face. So we hire, right in the Buddha's face. Heraus, mein Hund!
Here's your guy, Silas.
Nichts kann raus! Into the closet!
This would be me.
Here, improve the mind! Heil Hitler! When the Führer says, wie ist der Master Race? Wie heil, right in the first place. The Welcome workers of Naziland. But the glorious privilege is yours to be a Nazi. To work 48 hours a day for the Führer. Then the Führer says, we never will be slaves. We heil, but still we work like slaves. While the Führer brags and lies and rants and raves. We heil, and work into our graves. Heil Hitler! Get to work! Mach schnell! Then the Führer yells, I gotta have more shells! He heil! For him we make more shells. If one little shell should blow him right through, he'd heil! And wouldn't that be smell? Is this not wonderful? Is not our Führer glorious? Heil Hitler! What's that you say, Schweinhund? Verdammter Esel! Heil Hitler! Attention, workers! Through the kindness of the Führer, now comes the vacation with pay. Ah, the beautiful Alps with the birds, and the beautiful scenery, not forgetting to build up the body so we can work harder for the Führer. Heil Hitler! 1, 2, 3, heil! 1, 2, 3, heil! 1, 2, 3, heil! 1, 2, 3, heil! And now, the vacation is over by special decree of the Führer. Heil Hitler! You have been chosen to work overtime. They need more shells! Shells! More shells! They need more shells! They need more shells! To love the poor is a great disgrace. So be Heil, Heil, right in the poor's face. So be Heil, Heil, right in the poor's face.
Okay, so kind of a strange version of any kind of a Disney show, right? Oh, what I do back. So what were some methods used to sway your opinion of the enemy? Anyone? Anyone? Someone other than Emma. Emma always answers, Claire, thank you. Yes, they really depicted the enemy in very exaggerated ways. You see more examples of the dehumanization of the Japanese. You had the German soldier being a little bit, as we would say in my parents' generation, light in his loafers, right? He kind of swayed and seemed a little, girly. So, and they just seem kind of dumb, right? What else did you see? Anyone? Oh, Lucas, thank you. Yes, Lucas, you are right. They did, in fact, make everything just seem awful. They used the color red like crazy, red being kind of evil, and they didn't let him have any breaks, and there's no freedoms and things like that. And then that's juxtaposed, yes, Kirsten, you're right, with this idea of beautiful freedom, and you have the Statue of Liberty at the end. So why wouldn't everybody want to be American? They used these propaganda films to just make people feel proud to be American and how much better it is here as compared to what it is we're fighting. Genius. And to inspire people to help us to overcome that horrible fate we could have, we're going to have probably this most famous of all propaganda posters and images, and this is Rosie the Riveter. Rosie the Riveter is not a person. Write down Rosie the Riveter, though, in your notes. Rosie the Riveter is an icon. She represents the idea of a very, you'll notice, look at, she's got this pretty red scarf on. She's got plump, beautiful lipsticked lips. She's got mascara, maybe even some fake eyelashes. Look at those eyebrows. They are on fleek. So, but at the same time, she's got some guns, man. So she can be feminine and strong simultaneously. And this is really where you first see this image in American history. The fact that a woman can be a mother and a nurturer while also being a fighter. And once women are inspired to go into the workforce, it's actually Eleanor Roosevelt that inspires the government to set up daycares so that the women can go and work in the factories while the men are overseas fighting, and the children can be cared for. So that our daycares actually come out of the war and Eleanor Roosevelt. But the women are going to go and fight and work. And what they realize in the process is, man, it's kind of nice. You guys know it. The first time you get your own paycheck and you can do what you want, the women find it pretty invigorating. And after the war, most women will go back to the home. But many will stay in the workforce, and some of them that go home keep remembering the power they had in the workforce, and it's going to change women's trajectory from this point on. Now, when I was in Pearl Harbor, we actually went into an airplane hangar and we got to rivet. So that's me actually riveting. The first time I did it, it shot me completely backwards and I almost fell on my butt. So it's actually really hard, but that's like my favorite thing. I'm Rosie the Riveter. So Rosie wasn't a real person. She was just an icon. I'm a real person. That's me. All right. Last thing I want to say. I'm talking about how we have to motivate, and we're using propaganda to get people to understand the importance of their role in the war. President Franklin Roosevelt is going to issue an executive order 9066. And it is an order to round up Japanese Americans and place them in internment camps. After Pearl Harbor is bombed, you can imagine anybody that is Japanese is seen as a possible threat, a spy, a soldier that is going to try to infiltrate our wonderful democracy. And so partly to maybe protect them from attack, but mostly to protect the United States from them, he is going to issue this order and forcibly move over 100,000 Japanese citizens into these internment camps. They are mostly going to be in the southwestern part of the United States, but there are some in the Northwest as well. And basically, they are going to, I mean, look at these barracks. Those of you that last week were talking about how you'd been to Dachau, it really doesn't look all that different, does it? They would put barbed wire up, and they moved them all into these multiple family dwellings. They had to leave their single family homes. They had to leave their businesses. After the war is over and they come back, many of those businesses are gone. Some of them have been destroyed because they had been owned by the Japanese. So there is this fulfillment of the idea of trying to make the Japanese look subhuman in the propaganda. It is so effective that we actually don't just turn on the Japanese overseas, but we turn on the Japanese that are living in the United States. Some of them are second generation Japanese. They've never even been to Japan. The internment of the Japanese, in my humble opinion, is a dark spot on American history. The Japanese, though, they go to school there. They are actually going to hold 4th of July celebrations. They try, rather than turning on the United States and saying, you know, forget you guys, I can't believe you did this. They are going to respond with an excessive amount of patriotism because they want to prove that they are, in fact, patriotic American citizens. So the book that you are going to start reading today is going to talk about the Japanese experience in the United States. I will tell you right now, it is the easiest book I think you read in both mine and McGarity's class. It is historic fiction, but what it does is it highlights the role and the plight, really, of not just the Japanese, but also the Chinese in the United States. Because when Pearl Harbor is bombed, most Americans can't tell the difference between a Japanese American and a Chinese American. And so this story will highlight that. I will post how much you're going to read each day, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye. Oh, that didn't work. How do I stop it?